Welcome, welcome everyone. We're just going to allow everyone to come in. We have a very large group registered and we'll probably get started around 6:03. We're just going to allow more people to come in. Thank you so much for joining the Bellwether District Community Meeting. Good evening. For those that just arrived, we're going to let some more people come in. We have a very full meeting tonight and we'll get started around 6:03. Again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Okay, in the interest of time, we are going to get ready. We have a good amount of people in. So hello, welcome to our very first community meeting of 2023. Tonight, we have a really full agenda and you're going to hear some great updates from our Hillco Redevelopment Partners team. Before we get started, as always, I am going to do some housekeeping rules. If you don't know me, my name is Jasmine Sessoms. I serve as the Senior Vice President of Corporate Affairs for Hillco Redevelopment Partners. And we are going to be taking all questions following tonight's presentation. Remember, after the presentation, so please save all your questions until the end of the discussion. If you have a question, feel free to enter it in the Q&A function in the chat. The chat is disabled. I will not be able to read a question from the chat. If you would like to ask your question live, please raise your virtual hand and my colleague Matt will give you the ability to show your camera and unmute your line during the Q&A section of our presentation. If you could, please limit the live questions to one per person so we can give everyone equal time. We will be limiting each question and answer to 2 minutes so that we can get to as many as possible. As always, we will try to get through all the questions live. Any questions we do not get to, we do capture them and as always answer them live and we'll post them as well. So please, as always, if we don't get to your question, remember we will post them and we will respond in writing. So please, next slide. Tonight, you will hear updates on operations, environment, development, and community. And I would love to introduce my team that you're going to hear tonight. Next slide, please. New headshots. So you will hear from myself, Jasmine Sessoms, Mia Fiberanti, she's the Vice President of Corporate Affairs, Stephanie Eggert, who's our Senior Vice President of Operations, Juliana Connolly, who is our Executive Vice President of Environmental Remediation, Amanda Mazzi, who's Director of Mixed Use Development, George Needs is the SVP of Mixed Use Development, Justin Dunn, Senior Vice President of Industrial Development. So without further ado, let's get started. Steph, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jasmine. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to give a little update on where we are with the demolition activity. So if you could go to the next slide. These are, some really before and after photos, aerial shots to give you a sense of where we are on the demolition. So if you recall, we started this demolition immediately post-closing, so in late June 2020. And so far, we've completed about a bit over 90% of the demolition on site. And as you can see, a large majority of the infrastructure that once stood on the property has been demolished and removed. And we are, continuing that effort and slowly expect to wrap up the bulk of the demolition work here this year. And with that, you can go to the next slide and we'll turn it over to Juliana Conley.
Thanks, Steph. Hi, everyone. You can go to the next slide. So we're busy over here on remediation activities. We like to start with this slide because there are two responsible parties at this property for cleanup work. And so it's important to understand those distinctions as I talk through the work that we, PESRM or HRP, are working on. So the two responsible parties for the remediation cleanup work are ourselves, so PESRM or Hilco Redevelopment Partner. So we took over PESRM's obligations. And then the other responsible party is Evergreen or Sunoco, a party that ran the refinery prior to PESRM's operation of the refinery. So what we HRP are focused on are cleanup of releases, so releases of chemicals to the soil and the groundwater that occurred after September 2012, and all of the Act 2 reporting associated with that contamination, Act 2 being the Pennsylvania sort of site cleanup regulatory program. We're also responsible for sampling beneath all of the storage tanks that used to be present on site to evaluate whether releases occurred beneath those tanks. We're responsible for management of soil during redevelopment of the property, and we're responsible for vapor intrusion assessments into new buildings. And what vapor intrusion means is, can the volatile or the sort of vapor or air phase chemicals in the ground, making sure that those don't make it into the indoor air of the new buildings that will be constructed on site. Evergreen and Sunoco, who again, Sunoco operated the refinery prior to PES, is responsible for contamination that sort of was in place during their operation. So contamination that occurred prior to September 2012. Next slide, please. So in terms of the Act 2, or like actual remediation cleanup work that HRP is focused on, there's really 5 areas that we're focused on right now. These are areas or releases that we're bringing through the Act 2 regulatory program. And that program really starts with the middle of what's called a notice of intent to remediate. So these 5 starred areas that you see on the page are areas where we've submitted a notice of intent to remediate, and that's what formally sort of enters us into the Act 2 program or the land recycling program. And we do post all of our regulatory reports associated with this work to our website. If anyone's interested in looking at those, they can be pretty technical reports, but if you're interested in looking at them, you can find them on our website under community reports and then remediation. Next slide, please. Okay, so this table here, it corresponds to the 5 stars that I showed on the prior slide, and these are the 5 areas that we're currently working on bringing through Act 2. And I just want to pause for a second to say, these are the ones we're currently working on. It's very possible that we will find new releases as we're working through the redevelopment of the site, and as we encounter those, we will, this list may get longer. We may submit new notices of intent to remediate. And as that happens, we'll update during these subsequent meetings. So the 5 that we're showing here, you can see that sort of just the description of the way we describe the area, which just really has to do with a physical landmark, usually from the refinery. It's not that important. That's the release area. Then the date of the release, you can see the oldest one is 2013. You'll see these are all after 2012. So 2013, 2018, 2019, and then 2 in 2021. And the type of remediation is summarized in that next column. The first 2, you'll see are some sort of pumping or recovery of oil from the subsurface. Those are probably the larger two, not probably, they are the larger two of these 5 releases. And the UDEX release area, really the largest of the releases that we're focused on. And so that is a remedy I'm going to talk about a little bit more on the next page. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this UDEX area is the largest of these 5 releases that we're working on cleaning up. It covers about an 8-acre area on the site. So the whole property is over 1,000 acres. This area covers about 8 acres. And what I'm showing here, you don't need to worry so much about the details of the axes, but what I wanted people to see is in this blue line, what that is showing is the mass or the volume, the amount of the oil that's being recovered, that's being destroyed through our remediation process. So you can see that that work started in 2018, so prior to HRP's ownership, and then it's sort of increasing over time, and you can see it starts to even increase greater in sort of late in about 2 years ago, and that's when we sort of changed the remedial approach. We're using a different remediation technology that's in fact more effective at removing that contamination from the subsurface. So that's great, but we can see all of that contamination being removed from the subsurface in that area. Next slide. So as I mentioned, another thing we're very focused on is the AST, or above ground storage tank closure. So these are all, for anyone that's familiar with the site, you would have been able to see from the street these huge tanks, and they're called above ground storage tanks because they're above ground as opposed to underground storage tanks that would be more typical at like a gas station. And they held oil or processed oil and different types of oil used or processed in the refining process. And as part of the regulatory closure of these tanks, we need to sample the soil and the groundwater underneath to see if there were releases from those tanks that occurred that maybe no one was aware of because the tank covered such a big footprint. You couldn't really analyze underneath it. So we've grouped the tanks into different tank groups. That's what these color-coded areas show. And that's really just to sort of consolidate the regulatory reporting, so it's not so overwhelming. And again, if you're interested in seeing any of these reports, they can be found on our website. If you go to the community reports and then remediation, you'll see some of these tank closure sampling. There's a lot of analytical data, so chemical sampling data that we use to evaluate whether a release has occurred. Next slide, please. And the third sort of area of focus for our remediation team is what we refer to as the soil management plan. So the redevelopment of this property is going to require a lot of movement of soil around the property to achieve the grades that are necessary for construction. And what I mean by grades is just the ground surface level. So some of the areas of the site, the ground surface needs to come up to a higher level, and in other areas it'll be brought down lower. At a site like this, with the history of being used for oil refining for so long, there's the potential for the soil to be contaminated. And so prior to our acquiring the property, we came to an agreement with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection in a document called the Soil Management Plan, where we agreed to sample all of the soil that we were going to move prior to moving it. And the reason we wanted to do that is for a couple of reasons. One is to make sure we knew what was in the soil before we moved it, so we could make sure we were handling that soil appropriately during its movement, one. And then two, to make sure that the soil ends up in a new location, if it's moved, that's safe for the new use. So making sure that the more highly contaminated soils aren't put in a place where people would be more likely to come into contact with them. And so again, all these data, there's a lot of data under this soil management plan. Sampling, we sample the soil at a frequency of 1 sample per 2,000 yards, and we're going to be moving millions of yards of soil. So there's lots of soil sample results. And you can see those data again on our website if you go to community reports and then soil management. And next slide, please. Great, and I'm going to hand it over to George to talk through the framework plan.
Great, thanks, Juliana. And good evening, everyone. I'm just going to quickly spend a few minutes walking you through an overview of the conceptual master plan framework that we've developed for the site. You know, as you can imagine, one of the challenges associated with developing a site of this scale is that, you know, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to plan exactly how the site is going to look once it's fully built out. You know, naturally over time, markets change and evolve, which will sort of, you know, require us to respond accordingly. So, you know, when we consider planning for a site of this scale, we typically develop, you know, what we consider a master plan framework that lays out a street network, identifies key connection points into the existing road network and surrounding neighborhoods, while enabling some flexibility going forward. Next slide, Matt. So just to give everyone some context, this slide identifies a site within the greater context of the city. I mean, you're probably familiar with this, but the site area totals about 1,300 acres. And while it is a large land area, it is, you know, given its prior use, it does remain cut off from the rest of the city. It is bounded by a natural barrier in the form of the Schuylkill River to the west, and then the I-76 highway to the east. And one of the topics I'm going to get into is how we intend to create access to the site and develop those important connections back into the urban fabric. So in total, we plan to deliver around 13 to 15 million square feet over the course of a multi-phased, multi-year project, which is projected to generate up to 19,000 jobs. And those jobs will range across, you know, a range of salaries and qualifications needs as we really focus on two key industries. The first being a state-of-the-art industrial and logistics area that you can see highlighted in yellow, and that is located on the south side of the site. And the second being a life science campus shown in red, that will you know, sit on the north side of the site and will house important research and development and manufacturing activities associated with the life sciences industry. It's important to note that, you know, from an environmental standpoint, the redevelopment of this site is going to have, you know, huge benefits to the local communities that go beyond, you know, job creation, as the decommissioning and the removal of the refinery has reduced emissions within the city of Philadelphia by, you know, a huge 16%, which, you know, which is substantial. Next slide, Matt. So this next slide illustrates some more details associated with each of these areas. The industrial and logistics area totals approximately 10.5 million square feet, and that is planned to be redeveloped over approximately 750 acres on the southern side of the site. So that is everything south of the Passyunk Avenue. Here we're planning for, you know, important industrial and logistics users that will support the inner workings of the city and will deliver approximately 10,500 jobs. So on the north side of the site, so that's everything north of Passyunk Avenue, we're planning for a life sciences campus totaling approximately 3 to 4 million square feet across two distinct parcels. And you can see those, you know, those are shown and delineated with an active or by an active CSX railroad. And based on this, we're projecting approximately 8,500 direct jobs at full build out, covering the full spectrum of qualifications from lab technicians to facility managers, biochemists, and then, you know, obviously marketing and administrative professionals. So, you know, these jobs really require, again, a sort of a range of qualifications ranging from, you know, high school diplomas to a PhD. Next slide, Matt. So in developing the framework, we really drew from a number of planning studies that had been completed to help sort of inform important pedestrian, bicycle and open space connections that could be created. And we looked to existing frameworks developed under the Lower South and Southwest plans, as well as the Lower Schuylkill master plan. Next slide, please, Matt. And from that, we identified really 3 key project goals that we wanted to address as we developed this framework. The first being to reintegrate the site. Given its its prior use, being the home of the largest oil refinery on the East Coast, for the last century, the city has effectively been built and grown around it. So the first challenge we have to address is really how we integrate it back into the city fabric, and in particular, how we create new points to enable new access points that will enable new connections into the public street, bicycle, and pedestrian networks. So the second point of focus is creating green pathways, and this really considers how we can create a public realm and a street network that is safe, multimodal, and uses landscaping to connect open spaces while providing an enjoyable pedestrian experience, as well as thinking about other benefits like helping to manage stormwater runoff. And then the third and final point is thinking about how we enhance transit connections. So identifying ways we can introduce new SEPTA and transit services to the site that will enhance accessibility to the city and beyond. Next slide, please, Matt. So this next slide identifies new public streets that have been proposed on the site, and sort of really focus on sort of eight key access points where the site ties into the existing street network. So on the logistics campus, and again, that's everything sort of south of Passyunk Avenue, the plan has 2 key north-south connections. There's a Schuylkill Avenue and Francis Harper Drive, and they connect Passyunk Avenue to Penrose Avenue with an east-west connection in the form of Hartramp Street connecting out to 26th Street. And on the Life Sciences campus to the north, we have 3 primary access points that extends 34th Street into the site and provides additional connections out to Maiden Lane and Vere Ave through Thornton Way and Jackson Street. Next slide, please. This next slide looks at how we're proposing to tie into the existing bicycle network through a series of dedicated and shared bike lanes that will help facilitate a north-south bike connection that can connect to existing bike paths located at Grays Ferry Avenue to the north, and then all the way down to Penrose Avenue to the south, which will enable a safe and enjoyable cyclist experience through the site. Next slide, please. So this next slide illustrates sort of the idea of creating a single green connection, a single sort of green spine that runs all the way through the site. Where possible, this could take advantage of riverfront access by adding, we'll also be looking to add, thousands of plantings and trees so that, once all said and done, we'll be able to provide a sustainable landscaped pedestrian and bike trail that could facilitate an important sort of north-south green connection all the way from, Pennovation to the north, right down to the FDR Park to the south. Next slide, please. As we think about enhancing transit connections, we've had some initial conversations with SEPTA, and we'll be working with them to plan for new bus routes, new bus stops to enable transit access to and from the site. The image on the screen shows the existing bus networks and really illustrates the need for a north-south transit connection east of I-76 that will connect the site to key commuter rail and neighborhood links. Next slide, please. Yep, great. And just quickly before handing it over to Amanda, I just wanted to share some additional details associated with the phase one schedule for both industrial and life sciences areas. And you can see on the screen here, it really identifies both earthwork and vertical construction start dates. So, now that the end is in sight on the deconstruction, the next step prior to starting vertical construction is to regrade the site so that the building pads and infrastructure can be received, which is sort of the exercise or the activity which we are noting as earthwork. And we've recently commenced enabling work to begin earthwork on the industrial side of the site for phase one, with vertical construction anticipated to commence in Q3 of this year. Phase one of the life sciences is trailing by roughly 9 months. And we have the goal of starting earthwork in Q4 of this year, which would put ourselves in a position to be able to commence vertical construction in Q2 of next year. And, obviously, as we've been doing throughout this process, we're going to continue our community engagement efforts, and, we'll be hosting these quarterly meetings to share important project updates and details. Next slide, please, Matt.
Hi, I'm Amanda, and I'm going to take you guys through the next few slides, giving an overview of the first phase of the Life Science Campus. Next slide, please. First, to orient everyone, this slide shows an overview of the Life Science Campus, highlighting our first phase. The entirety of the campus is located directly between the Schuylkill River and I-76, north of Passyunk Ave and just south of Pinnovation's campus. Our goal with this first phase is to reintegrate the formerly closed off site back into the city grid. We chose the parcel closest to the existing infrastructure and the surrounding neighborhoods. We focused on connection back to the city with 3 main points of entry from the north and south. The first being 34th and Warfield to Maiden Lane from the north. Secondly, capitalizing on the existing I-76 off-ramp, and then finally along Vare Ave to connect to Passyunk Ave to the south. Next slide. Zooming in further, we are planning approximately 500,000 square feet in 3 buildings with surface parking. These buildings are designed to attract GMP or good manufacturing practice users, which will accommodate the manufacturing and storage of pharmaceutical and therapeutics or other processes that need to be conducted within a controlled environment. They will be larger footprint buildings that tend to be single story, totaling 150 to 180,000 square feet per building. They will have large open floor plans, 40-foot clear ceiling heights, and mezzanine office space. There are also a few precedent images on this slide showing a similar product type, highlighting the eventual look and feel of our campus. Next slide, please. The main roads in our first phase are Fortin Way and Jackson Street, with loading and service drives hidden from the main streets behind the buildings, but still very accessible. We are planning for dedicated bike lanes and separate sidewalks with landscape buffers in between, and we will have on-street parking and lots of street trees. This slide also shows a few images of Columbus Boulevard, which serves as the inspiration for our campus's design and feel. Next slide, and then I'll be handing it over to Justin.
Justin, we can't hear you. Try again.
Oops, sorry about that.
There we go.
Thank you, Amanda. There we go. I appreciate that. Matt, if you don't mind going to the next slide, please. All right. For those of you who have been following along, this plan should look pretty familiar. It hasn't really changed much in a year. As George had described earlier, that everything south of Passyunk is slated for the industrial logistics park. It's about 10.5 million square feet. Really 3 miles of newly constructed infrastructure, including roadway utilities, pedestrian and bike paths. And highlighted here or outlined in blue is our first phase for industrial, which we're really excited about to get kicked off this fall. This is the area where we're focused on earthwork, or I should say prioritizing that earthwork. And it's slated for 2 buildings, about 1 million square feet total. So the southern building, considered lot 15, is about 326,000 square feet. And the northern building is about 700,000 square feet. Part of phase 1 will include about 1 mile of new road infrastructure. So that's kind of first step, a new intersection, which we'll show you in an upcoming slide, and then about 1 mile worth of new roadway utilities to service the vertical. And that's the first step in the southern piece for the industrial logistics part. Next slide, please. As we zoom in here, this is lot 15, the 326,000 square foot building. We are placing that at the corner of Hart Tramp, a new Hart Tramp extended, and Francis Harper Drive, again, another new road, and also 26th Street to the east. This is a 40-foot clear building, a Class A industrial. You'll see what a Class A industrial really looks like on the next slide, Matt. So you see some front or building frontage images. These are, again, Class A. These are actual renderings of the design that we have moved forward with. So you should see a building that looks very similar to this on the storefront. Again, lots of glazing, some glass. We really wanted to kind of showcase this as the first building, and also with its high, I should say, higher visual placement on the site. And that main entrance would be located at the corner of Hart Tramp and Francis Harper, again, both new streets within our industrial park. Slide. This is lot 16, again, a 700,000 square footer. Again, this is a 40-foot clear. We do have an 8-inch reinforced floor slab that we are proposing for these so they can handle heavy loads. This will accommodate a large spectrum of potential tenants, whether that be for manufacturing or logistical, equipment for MHE. One thing that you'll notice on these site plans, we're very carefully designing these to accommodate for stormwater ponds, as you see to the north, kind of the darker green, and also adequate truck parking. So this is served as overflow storage of trucks. The point being that we want to contain any truck parking and any overflow parking within this park and within each individual site. So that is an important aspect of our designs that we do consider. Next slide. We'll start talking about the traffic analysis. Next slide. So as part of our project, and really at the very start of us purchasing this property back in 2020, we commenced the traffic impact study. What's extremely important is for our site to actually function and work, it has to work from a traffic perspective, and that works both ways. The community wants this to work, the region wants this to work from a traffic perspective, we also need it to work. So as we kicked off that traffic study, we worked very closely with PennDOT and City of Philadelphia Streets. And again, one of the major challenges that we've faced is really opening up this site that was closed off for nearly a century. So that comes with its challenges of how do we get traffic fluid in and out? How do we improve the surrounding area to make sure that this does work for not only our park, but for the community? And as we have gone through that study, which has taken about 2 years now, we have really honed in on what the offsite improvements will look like. One of those is a new signal at the intersection of 26th and Hart Tramp Street, and also new decel and XL lanes along there, including an additional right turn lane all the way from the intersection of Hart Tramp down to Penrose. So it'll be a double right turn coming from Penrose. And selfishly, I drive that route every day, and I'm usually the one stuck in the line while people cut me off to turn right. So I'm looking forward to those improvements on a personal note. Next slide. So this kind of hones in on that intersection and the start of those improvements. Again, you'll notice a new decel lane coming into our site, and you'll notice an XL lane exiting our site, and then a new lane along 26th Street heading south. Next slide, please. On the life science front, the new roads, I think Amanda really hit a lot of those already, but again, extending the bike lane paths and some of the restriping from 34th Street. We are also adding a stop sign for safety control. We have maiden lanes underneath bike lane and pedestrian pathways, and then we do have major improvements along Bear Avenue and 28th Street. Again, really trying to open this portion of the site up back to the public to service these buildings. And that's just the start. That's an initial phase of these road improvements. You can see on this plan, you'll see Fortin Way, an extension into 34th Street as we continue, and Jackson Street. So there's much more to come as we continue the development. But again, this just focuses on phase one, which we hope to start here on the life science end about middle of next year. Next slide, please. Another important aspect for us to consider was the truck parking. So we've heard from many community members, even on other projects, the main concern of trucks parking and idling in residential neighborhoods throughout the city. So we wanted to address that kind of head on, especially as it relates to our park. Again, this is a very large park. We are very conscious of creating adequate parking for trucks within the site itself. We've also looked at how to discourage trucks from actually entering neighborhoods in the surrounding area of ours. Main one at this point being one on the east side of Hartramp. So where it's highlighted here, maintaining right in, right out movement. So while that new intersection at 26 and Hartramp will be, constructed, we have kept what's called, people will laugh at me, but it's the pork chop that allows a right in, right out only at Hartramp as you go east. And that discourages any movement, including trucks, from going straight from our site into Hartramp Street. So again, this would be not technically a full movement signal intersection. It will allow left turns from 26th Street into our site, right turns from 26th into our site, left, right, and left or right out, but not straight through. So we're maintaining that right in, right out on the eastern part of Hartramp. Next slide, please. Sustainability, next slide. All right, so sustainability is an important core value of our development and design to completion of construction. We do hire the best professionals to help provide innovative ideas for consideration. For example, we are currently underway with an energy master plan that really looks at including sustainable technologies such as solar, which we feel very strongly that solar is going to be an integral part of our energy plan. Along with that, we're looking at future-proofing this as much as possible. For example, electric vehicle charging stations being planned. We're looking at extensive landscaping above code requirements. Again, just very important initiatives for us. And as Juliana alluded to earlier on the site, or the soil management plan, an important aspect for us is to be able to regrade our site, as we have some higher areas, some lower areas. About 40% of our site was within the 100-year floodplain, which was known for flooding. It's almost, you could see it if you're driving over the bridge today. There's a lot of low-lying areas that contain water. So we are regrading that site to raise to get those elevations out of the 100-year and even the 500-year in most cases for any building finished floor slabs. And then last but not least for us on the building side, we do intend to incorporate LEED initiatives so that we can try to get LEED certified buildings out here as much as possible. Next slide. So another item that we wanted to cover was flooding. So we began analyzing the site for flooding in 2020, pretty much immediately after acquiring the property. Again, as it was known for flooding, we'd seen with our own eyes some of those issues. There's also just drainage issues in general on our site. So as a result, we've worked with FEMA and the City of Philadelphia to prepare a comprehensive floodplain study that was very, very massive. It included 17 bridge structures, modeled 17.5 square miles, and it included a drainage area of 1,900 square miles. So as Kurt would point out, that's equivalent to nearly 920,000 football fields. It's an incredible stat. So after 2 years of close collaboration with FEMA and the City of Philadelphia, we did receive approval to regrade our site, allowing long-term resiliency with proposed buildings and parking lots well above the 100-year floodplain. And again, having our finished floors outside of the 500-year continues on that building the resiliency. So the process we followed included multiple iterations and studies that were closely collaborated, again, with the City of Philadelphia and FEMA. The City of Philadelphia accepted the mapping revision in November of 2022. Next slide. Next, there you go. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so this actually shows the actual area in red is what is currently today in the 100-year floodplain. So again, it's about 40% of our site. Obviously, as you get closer to the river, that's where it floods. So all existing interim and future stormwater runoff is going to continue to be monitored by Philadelphia Department of Environmental Protection. And then we are proposing new drainage infrastructure to be designed and planned for the entire development that will significantly improve the drainage for the site. So this doesn't just include inlets and storm drains for conveyance, but it also includes several ponds, large ponds for retention, and that manages stormwater runoff, both quality and quantity. So it treats for quality purposes under the state regulations for stormwater quality control. It also treats for quantity management. So it releases at a rate of stormwater at a specific designed 10-year management before it enters the Schuylkill River. So everything enters into our ponds. Again, it is controlled from a quantity management perspective before it enters the Schuylkill River. I think that is it for me. Next slide. I will turn it over to Mia. And thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you, Justin, and hi, everyone. Good to be with you tonight. My name is Mia Fioravanti, and I'm the Bellwether District's Vice President of Corporate Affairs. So we're wrapping up tonight's meeting with a few updates on community from the last few months. As we've shared in the past, working with young people, particularly South and Southwest Philadelphia residents, is a huge focus for HRP. And throughout the year, through our Career Connected Learning program, we offer internships, scholarships, job shadowing opportunities, and pre-apprenticeship training, all with the goal of creating pathways for young people to careers in real estate and construction. And so tonight, I want to just highlight 2 recent engagements with students and then preview some of our upcoming opportunities. Matt, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So this past month, we hosted 25 career and technical education, or CTE, students on the site as part of PA Attorney General's Career Awareness Week. These students signed up to participate because they have a particular interest in real estate as a career path. And so during the visit, students participated in a tour of the Bellwether District, and heard from a panel of our employees talking about different types of careers within real estate and construction. Matt, if you go to the next slide. Thank you. We also led a session with Girls Inc., which is an organization headquartered in South Philly with a mission to provide mentoring, education, and all-around support to young women throughout our city. During our volunteer session, Stephanie Eggert, who you heard from earlier, led a science experiment during which students built and tested a catapult, which was really fun. And so just generally looking forward, we're about to start recruiting for summer internship positions. We are going to be sharing more information about these opportunities very soon, but in the meantime, if you are a South or Southwest Philadelphia student, or if you know of a student who may be interested in applying, Matt, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. Please contact us at the Bellwether District at hillcoglobal.com. Additionally, our pre-apprenticeship partner, CARP, which as an organization prepares people for careers in carpentry, is also accepting applications on a rolling basis. So if you're interested in either opportunity, internships or pre-apprenticeship opportunities, please email us at the Bellwether District at hillcoglobal.com. If you could go to the next slide, Matt. So we also wanted to provide a quick update on our CBA process and timeline. As we shared with you in the fall, we are committed to a community benefits agreement, or CBA. For those of you who may be unfamiliar, a CBA is a commitment made between a developer and community members that really solidifies the community's input and how a developer might give back. So I'll just reshare a few key details about our process and one update. So we will be utilizing our community advisory panel for CBA discussions. Again, this group is kind of a group of 25 registered community organizations and nonprofits that serve and represent the South and Southwest community. And they've been really our eyes and ears in the community. And so we will be utilizing that CAP for our CBA discussions. We've also extended an invitation to the United South-Southwest Coalition to become a member of our CAP and also participate in CBA discussions. We will be utilizing a third-party facilitator to lead those conversations, and we expect discussions will be ongoing over the course of the next year, and we hope to have a completed CBA in early to mid-2024. We do have one update. So we had originally anticipated a February start date, but we will now be kicking things off in the month of April. And importantly, you know, we are also committed to capturing feedback outside of the CBA process, and we'll continue our kind of standard outreach. So public meetings, CAP meetings, individual meetings with community groups and neighbors, our annual survey, and in-person focus groups. So we look forward to providing updates on the CBA process throughout the year and kicking things off shortly. Matt, if you could just go to the next slide. And last but not least, we wanted to share the date of our next planned public meeting. That will be held on Tuesday, June 13th at 6 p.m. So with that, Jasmine, please open things up for Q&A.
Thank you, Mia. I'm going to go to our written questions first while Matt prepares to do our live questions. So remember, if you have a question and you would like to ask it live and on camera, just raise your hand and Matt will call on you and move you to a panelist. So let's start with, will rail access be provided to the industrial zone? Justin, would you like to take that one?
Absolutely, and it's a great question. So on the industrial side, really the only rail served portion of the site is at the very, very south. So actually south of Penrose. That's the only area right now that has the potential to have any rail served buildings or some sort of rail yard. Again, it's a very short piece of rail that enters there. So I think it's serviced by Conrail. Otherwise, we are not planning on having rail in any other area of the industrial campus at this point. Hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Justin. That's great. Let's go with Justin. I'm going to stay with you. Any net zero buildings in the initial phases?
Well, as a lead AP, I would love to do a net zero building. I just don't know that that's honestly realistic day one. I think we're going to do everything we can to reduce carbon footprint. Again, having our energy master plan as part of that with solar. We are building these buildings to have an extra 5 PSF to handle solar on the roof. We're looking at all options on the lead front, including putting in infrastructure for electric vehicles. But again, I think it would be hard to go full net zero building on the first construction project here. But it's a great question, and it's a great goal, and we're striving to reduce our carbon footprint as much as possible.
Thanks, Justin. All right, let's switch it up. Juliana, you're up. Will there be a vapor recovery system built into the site plan?
Great, thanks, Jazz. So I just want to, I'm going to assume that this question is related to vapor intrusion mitigation. And what I mean by that is migration of vapors from the subsurface into the indoor air of buildings. If the person asking the question, if you meant something else by vapor recovery, feel free to add that in the Q&A, or if I'm misunderstanding the question. So if the question is, will there be vapor intrusion mitigation systems built into the site plan or into the buildings? The answer is yes, there likely will be for some, maybe not all of the buildings. And so let me talk a little bit more about that. There are volatile constituents present in the subsurface. So there's a potential at portions of the site for migration into indoor air. And we'll do additional sampling after earthwork occurs in the footprints of the buildings to evaluate further that potential for vapor intrusion mitigation. And essentially, the simplest way to think about it is where there is the potential, meaning there's enough of those volatile chemicals in the subsurface, where there's the potential for that migration to occur, we'll have a vapor intrusion mitigation system of some kind in the building. And there's different ways to mitigate vapor intrusion. But there are portions of the site that are not as impacted with volatile constituents. And so there may be some buildings. So it'll be a building by building analysis. But yes, we do expect that some of the buildings on site will have vapor intrusion mitigation systems.
Thanks, Juliana. Justin, I feel like this one would be in your lane. No pun intended. Is there a bike?
Is that why? I do ride bikes.
That was
actually, it's a great question. It's a great question. We are looking at every way possible to make that connection to the Schuylkill River Trail. It's not as simple or as cut and dry as it may appear for us. I will say that on 34th Street, as well, as we continue that connection all the way down through our site and down into Penrose, we think that there's some opportunities to make the connection through that roadway and the bike lanes that we're planning there. So again, more to come on that. I don't have a perfectly clear answer for you there as we continue to investigate the best way to make connections to the Schuylkill River Trail. Sorry.
Thanks, Justin. Matt, do we have any live questions to take?
We don't. Someone, there was a Francis, I believe, who had her or his hand raised earlier. So if you do have a question, raise it again, and we can get you on. But that's it.
Okay. Mia, how does someone get connected with the internship program, and do you know how much we are going to pay interns?
Sorry. Thank you, Jasmine. Great question. So we are going to go out with some what I would call marketing materials over the next few weeks to share information about how people get formally connected with our internship programs. But in the meantime, we want to get a head start on it. If you are interested, as I shared in my presentation, feel free to contact either me at the email you see on your screen or at our general email address, the Bellwether District @hocoglobal.com. And we pay our interns $13 an hour.
Thanks, Mia. We have a CBA question. Why don't me and you tag team this one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why haven't CBA discussions begun? Why are they postponed until April 2023? Your presentation today, it looks like you finalized the plan before committing to the community.
I'll take the first part on why the process is delayed. We very intentionally paused to have discussions with our CAP about process, which delayed our start date. So we originally, again, had a February start date, but hearing some feedback on the process, we paused. We had a discussion with the CAP and other organizations before getting it back on the calendar. So we're anxious to get started.
And I'll take the second part of the question. It says your presentation today, it looks like you finalized a plan before committing to the community. I will say this is our 10th public quarterly meeting, and we have meetings in between. So we certainly have been gathering community input, feedback, and our plans are not finalized. We are still actively talking to the community and searching for input, especially around community investments. Where should we be putting our dollars, times, and resources, David? So certainly we are not finished, and we are still soliciting community feedback through this process. As Mia has mentioned in her presentation, we have done extensive community engagement and will continue to do so. Thank you for your question. Okay. Going once, going twice. I do see that we are almost at time. So seeing no additional raised hands, and Matt, let me know, keep me honest. Any more raised hands?
Nope, not at the moment.
Thank you, Matt. Well, I will give you 4 minutes back of your time. Again, you have my contact information and you have Mia's. Oh, we have a final question. Are you involving, hey, Miss Karen, are you involving young people in your community outreach? Mia, do you want to take that for my beloved Miss Karen?
Yep, I'm happy to. So I guess the one way is what I mentioned previously, that we are, deeply engaged with students in career awareness activities, job shadowing events, internships, pre-apprenticeship opportunities, to ensure that young people are kind of exposed to career paths and career potential in real estate construction. So that's kind of the first answer. And then secondly, I'll just give a specific example. We have in-person community-led focus groups happening right now, and several of our focus groups are students or young people only. So those conversations are a great opportunity for us to hear directly from young people about how they feel about development or what investments they want us to be making in the community. So we are kind of reserving space specifically for young people in a multitude of ways.
Thank you, Mia. Okay. Seeing no more questions, going once, going twice, and the participant number is going down. I thank you so much for joining us this evening for our public meeting, and we look forward to seeing you again, one in between and before our June 13th meeting, but certainly at our June 13th meeting. Have a wonderful evening.